Hello, and welcome back to It's a Very Exciting Time, a podcast by a UFO nerd and his tolerant friend. My name is Scott, and I've been fascinated by the phenomena my whole life.
And my name is Chuck. I'm an aerospace nerd and a tolerant friend.
We started this podcast because since 2017, there have been shocking revelations. From news of secret Pentagon programs to confirmed Navy videos of astonishing craft. In a nutshell, now that we know that the government has recovered non-human technology.
Or at least we will after catastrophic disclosure happens.
It raises the natural. We change the line every time, man.
I was not aware of this.
It raises the natural question. If UFOs are real, what else? Suddenly, some of these other parts of the phenomenon that seemed unlikely are pulled into the realm of the possible.
And they may still be unlikely. But even if it's new science and not aliens,
woo, it's a very exciting time.
Oh, man. So everyone, quick reminder before we get into it, you can find our show notes at veryexcitingtime.com and support us by going to patreon.com/veryexcitingtime.
All right. Do you want to redo the intro, or are you good with that?
Nah, I love it.
All right.
I love it. I was unaware that you change my line every time, but I'm delighted by this.
It's funny because I never would have changed the line, but then you started changing it a few episodes ago. You were adding little tweaks, so I've been updating it each time.
I think I knew there was something different last time, but it seemed right. And this time I was like, hang on.
Yeah. All right, Chuck, I got some bad news for you, buddy. Unfortunately, the UAP disclosure amendment that we were so hyped for that Senator Schumer put up, it has crashed and burned. The final NDAA resolution did include some UAP language, and there's some stuff to celebrate here. You know, there was some funding stuff that Gillibrand put in about basically you can't have funding for your secret Black Ops UFO program if the Congress doesn't know about it, which great law. I have no idea how they're going to enforce it.
Yeah, right.
But of course, the main thing we were hyped about was Schumer's disclosure amendment. And there is still some stuff in there. We're going to talk about it, but it falls pretty short of what Schumer was aiming for. Notably, it completely removes the eminent domain clause, which we were kind of expecting. But worse, it removes the JFK style review board. So I've got a little bit here.
That's surprising.
It is, yeah. The final bill requires the National Archives to create a collection of government documents, both classified and unclassified, that, quote, pertain to unidentified anomalous phenomena, technologies of unknown origin, and non-human intelligence. Similar to what was in the Schumer Amendment, all of the covered records are to be released 25 years after creation, except in cases in which the president or the government agency that created the record decide it would be a security risk.
Oh, that second part is important. So the president could ban it, but anyone who made it could decide they don't want to share it. So basically they're just not going to share anything at all. Okay.
Yeah. So your first instinct might be, hey, this doesn't sound too bad. You're still getting UFO record collections. There's still an expectation of release. That's pretty important. So Daniel Sheehan, who is a famous lawyer we've talked about before, he's heavily involved in UAP stuff. In the outside world, people would probably be more familiar with him for his involvement in Watergate and the Pentagon Papers cases. He had a quote saying, while this UFO UAP provision of the NDAA would be a significant achievement, gone from the legislation are several crucial features. First, there is no longer an independent review board with a subpoena power to compel the transfer of information from executive branch agencies and private companies. Second, information newer than 25 years old may be withheld by the agencies in possession of it, e.g., the CIA, with no entity capable of overruling that decision. Third, there is no eminent domain authority to mandate the return of UFO UAP technologies currently in the hands of private aerospace defense contractors to the government. And lastly, the distribution of oversight responsibility to 6 different committees in Congress does not provide an adequately centralized authority to overrule agencies that wish to keep information secret.
Wow. The 6 distinct committees thing is somehow rough. I didn't read that the first time. Yeah. It doesn't seem like there's anything left.
Very little. Yeah. And it's one of those things where on paper, the idea of a records collection that still has a mandate for disclosure sounds good. But, as he just pointed out, first of all, there's plenty of ways that they can get around contributing records to the collection in the first place. And then there are plenty of ways where once they're in there, they can say, we're not going to release them. And if someone just doesn't comply, they don't have subpoena power or authority to overrule them. So, yeah, it's frustrating. Representative Burleson said, ultimately, this disclosure language is a gutted, watered-down version of what the American people deserve. It won't bring us any closer to UAP truth. The remaining provisions are net negative and work against transparency. Without clear definitions of terms and enforcement mechanisms, the so-called intelligence agencies can continue hiding the truth from us.
I love when people say so-called intelligence agencies.
So-called, yeah.
But what were the without clear definition of terms? What was that?
Oh, yeah. So Schumer's original amendment, I forget how long it was, but it was dozens of pages long and included very clear definitions of what non-human technologies meant. Remember, there was the thing about the Navy wouldn't release videos of transmedium or submerged objects because the term UAP meant aerial. That was why they changed it to anomalous. So Schumer's amendment was very clear with their language to avoid shenanigans like that in the future. The new amendment is 6 pages long and does not define any of those terms. So presumably it is up to the head archivist to define them, which is not great. And of course, ambiguity is our enemy here. So,
yeah. Okay, great. So that sucks.
Yeah. Representative Burchett was, of course, a little more blunt in his feedback on this. He said, we got ripped off. We got completely hosed. They stripped out every part.
Thank you. That's how I was feeling.
Yeah. Surprisingly, I guess not surprisingly, it was Schumer and Round's amendment. But when this went down, Schumer has enough on the line with his political legacy that I'm always kind of surprised when he sticks with it and really goes after it. Senator Schumer and Senator Rounds, the sponsors of the bill, engaged in a colloquy on the Senate floor to express how frustrated they are.
Colloquy, huh? Hang on here. I need to... okay. Okay, colloquy, a formal dialogue between members of Congress regarding pending legislation.
Right. Okay. So it's like a scripted thing where they get to stand up and my colleague from Florida will surely agree with me that this is a load of bull crap. And then you'd be like, yes, absolutely. My colleague from Portland expressed it admirably. This is a load of coarse crap,
Yeah. So what we do could be considered a colloquy.
Yeah. So Senator Schumer said, there was a whole thing here. It's worth watching, but there were a couple of bits I wanted to pull out. Schumer said, we have been notified by multiple credible sources that information on UAPs has also been withheld from Congress, which, if true, is a violation of laws requiring full notification to the legislative branch, especially as it relates to the 4 congressional leaders, the defense committees, and the intelligence committees. And I wanted to hammer on this because since Schumer's amendment came out after David Grusch, I think there was a perception that it was entirely about David Grusch, which has never been what Schumer said, and it's not what the amendment itself said, but it's worth hammering this point. they've received testimony from multiple whistleblowers,
Right.
including firsthand whistleblowers. And Schumer has always been very clear. This isn't just about what David Grusch said. We have heard over and over, we are being lied to, and that's what this is about.
Right.
So yeah, he's hopping mad.
That's awesome. I mean, I hope that what this means is that they'll, the next NDAA will get the same treatment.
Mm-hmm. Fingers crossed. I mean, I have heard a little bit of a vibe that while this is disappointing, we still get the foundation of the National Archives will have a UAP collection with an expectation of release. Tightening up the details of how it operates is still something that could be bolted on in the future.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, Schumer and Rounds lobbed the ball back and forth on the Senate floor for a little bit. They discussed how their disclosure amendment was modeled on the JFK Records Act and how it would have addressed the lack of trust and transparency. And Schumer kind of concluded with this banger of a quote. He said, "It is an outrage that the House did not work with us on our UAP proposal for a review board. This means declassification of UAP records will be up to the same entities that have blocked and obfuscated their disclosure for decades. We will keep working to change the status quo."
Yeah, hell yeah. I'm glad he's not giving up. A little demoralizing, but it sounds like he's sticking to it. So
yeah, for sure. And I agree about the demoralizing part, but I do have a few quotes from people in the community who are kind of trying to find the silver lining in it.
Okay.
First up, good old Chris Mellon, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense. He said, in response directly to Schumer on the Senate floor, he said, "It is heartening to see prominent members of the Senate reiterating their support for legislation to provide greater accountability and transparency on the UAP issue. There is no doubt in my mind that critical information on this important subject is still being withheld from Congress and the public."
Yeah. Good old hashtag UFO daddy. Always in there to remind us, we have made progress, even if it doesn't always feel like it.
No, totally. Mellon and Elizondo and that cadre, they really started this. And it's not like there was nothing happening before, but basically after 2017, after To the Stars, they switched into lobbying mode. They're like, okay, you know what? We're going to go change the ground truth about this in Congress. And it's easy to get demoralized about seeing this really good bill get shot down by 2 Republicans. It's still crazy making to me that 2 dudes in the House could torpedo the whole thing. But it's good to remember that ton of progress has been made since 2017. In 6 years, we have gone from this being a topic that most people laughed at to the Senate Majority Leader putting this language up in the NDAA and it being defeated, but not mocked, not laughed at. It was just no, we're not doing that. But no one was like, why is this in here? This is nonsense. Schumer's lost his mind.
Yeah. So you mentioned that there were 2 people. I didn't realize that. Who were the 2 people?
Oh man, I didn't write them down this time. We talked about them in the previous episode.
That's all right.
I think it was Turner. It was the Mikes. Remember the Mikes and Mitch? Mike Turner and someone else. Yeah, it's frustrating. Well, okay, actually, you've led me into the next quote here fairly well.
Okay.
So Merrick von Rennenkampf, who is a former DoD analyst and current opinion writer with The Hill, said, "The most important and telling takeaway of all of this may be that opposition to the Schumer Rounds UAP Disclosure Act was led by 2 politicians with deep two-way ties to the defense industry, including one whose district includes the base that housed Project Blue Book," and that's Wright-Patterson in Ohio.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So, I mean, if it's only 2, at least we know who the opposition, who the evil villains are.
Yeah, it's it's one of those things where from the outside, I am hesitant to place all of the blame at the foot of these guys. I mean, don't get me wrong.
I'll do it.
The blame is at their feet. They're the ones who objected to it and wouldn't pass it. But what I'm trying to avoid is falling into they're in the pocket of Lockheed. Like Lockheed wrote them $1 million check and said, don't let this pass. And they said, okay. That's what we're hearing, right? Like Ross Coulthart and people like him are being very clear. There was strong, powerful lobbying by the defense industry, by private aerospace contractors, especially against the eminent domain stuff. But that, basically they were coming in and saying, no, don't do that. But it's one of those things where I haven't seen any proof of that. It's just something I've heard people claim, and it fits my worldview. So some part of me is a little bit like, I don't know if I can quite come out and say like, Lockheed torpedoed this. Sure, it's suspicious that, this guy has defense contracts. But frankly, if you go look up a list of all of the senators and, people who have defense contracts, it's not just like these mustache twirling Republican villains. Like there's a lot of them. So I don't know. As much as I would love to say like, it was Lockheed. Who knows?
Yeah.
But yes, something to be said for knowing who the opposition is. Lue Elizondo, former head of ATIP, said, have no fear. We already have a plan B, plan C, and so forth. We now know where the vulnerabilities of the beachhead lie and where the incoming fire is from. This is extremely important and valuable for disclosure.
Wow. Big Daddy Lue's got big daddy backup plans. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah, I do think it's funny that Lue's military background kind of comes out whenever he talks about something. The instant there's a hint of like, there's a conflict, like he goes straight to like D-Day metaphors. Like we're storming the beach at Normandy. The UAP Disclosure Act took the first bullet, but those of us back in the boats, we know like that's where the machine gun nest is. And we just got, damn, dude.
Right. Like you can tell what his Netflix watch list is. It's just like Normandy films all night long.
100%. Now, I've got one more quote here from Richard Dolan, who is a legendary UFO researcher.
Okay.
I don't quote Richard Dolan a whole lot on this show. I have mixed feelings about him. Richard Dolan has been around forever. He is incredibly prolific. He has written a bunch of very well-regarded books. He is a fixture on both the podcast and documentary and convention scene. It's always a little hesitant when it's clear that someone has made their career out of this. Like I don't object to any UFO person writing a book or something, but when it's like, that's all they're doing, I don't know. It rings me a little bit the wrong way. And he said some really weird shit about the pandemic that made me think like, okay, I don't know about Dolan anymore. But that said, he had a good quote about this. He said, what I am saying is, just like how the Sean Kirkpatrick hearing in April of this year backfired and arguably led to the appearance of someone like David Grusch to really just give that position the ultimate smackdown, so too, the gutting of the UAP Disclosure Act in this NDAA may well also backfire. If they were afraid of catastrophic disclosure erupting, they may have just lit the fuse.
That's such a good phrase. Like, I appreciate what he's trying to say, but when he says catastrophic disclosure like that, all I hear is like a big budget action movie, like Catastrophic Disclosure, starring Vin Diesel, in theaters now.
They thought they could control disclosure, but they just lit the fuse.
Now we're going to do it the catastrophic way.
There's nothing more catastrophic than family. I mean,
shit.
I'm going to tip my hat a little bit here. While we were prepping for this, like I had written down like Vin Diesel voice, and Chuck was trying to look up a sample of Vin Diesel's voice so he knew how to imitate it.
Yeah,
And I hear him
I want to
typing,
imitate well.
and he goes, videos of Groot won't be very helpful, will they?
Right?
Said
It
no.
was
He's
just,
like, what about Vin Diesel on helium? Like, no, man.
and the internet is not providing for me today.
You got to search for Vin Diesel family. You'll get a million
Uh-huh.
results.
Yeah.
Family. All right. So that's it with the UAP Disclosure Act. It's dead,
All
at
right.
least for this year. We got something. It's not nothing, but definitely it's watered down enough that we cannot realistically expect this to be a path towards disclosure anymore. Kind of like
Okay.
with Arrow, right? Like, oh, like before they formed Arrow, it's like, wouldn't it be great if there was an official, like body that was in charge of investigating you? Like, well, be careful what you ask for. If you're not careful, what you're going to get is the DoD appointed the Department of Keeping Secrets and teasing the public with just enough plausible explanations, and to put a guy in charge of it who was happy with that mission.
One of the things that I really respect this old PM of mine back, I don't know, 8 years ago. I was really demoralized about something not working out. And he said to me, hey, the great thing is that just because it didn't work now doesn't mean it won't work in 2 years. And I think that's probably true here too.
Oh, it's especially true here. And, like we joked before about that quote, Lue Elizondo telling people, like, listen, if you care about this, like, you're going to drive yourself crazy if you're paying attention to it every day. Go get a hobby and check back in 5 years. And of course, everyone was like, what does he know about 5 years? And he's addressed this in interviews. He's like, it was just a number, you guys. Like, the point is, it's going to take time. So
it's just a number. You clearly didn't listen to my advice. Go get a hobby.
Go get a hobby. Yeah. So, in other news, Ross Coulthart has been full steam ahead. He's, I don't know if we mentioned, Ross actually got a contract with News Nation. So before he was completely freelance, but was kind of mostly working with Channel 7 News in Australia. So all the documentaries that we've seen Ross do up until this point were released through Channel 7. He's been working closely with News Nation since the David Grusch story broke. They were the ones who released the initial interview. And they've now signed a contract with him. So he's working with them mostly on the UAP topic.
Cool.
And we hadn't seen a lot from him, but all of a sudden a bunch of stuff dropped all in a row. So he's been all over News Nation lately. He's got a big interview up with Gary Nolan, which I actually haven't had a chance to watch yet, that I'm excited about. But more notably, recently he put up an interview with retired Navy Admiral and former head of NOAA, Tim Gallaudet. He was interviewed by Ross on News Nation, and Admiral, God, I'm butchering this name, I'm sure. Is it Gallaudet or something? It's some French thing, right?
Gallaudet. It's fine. All
right. So the short version of it is Gallaudet firmly backed Grusch's claims. He said
we should call him Admiral Tim. I think
Admiral Tim, that feels really disrespectful. So Admiral Tim said, point blank, we are being visited by non-human intelligence with technology we really don't understand and with intentions we don't understand either.
Huh. Wow. Like, that's just straight up in there, huh? Surprising for a Navy Admiral.
Yeah. And I think that's what's interesting about this. It's not that he's saying anything we haven't heard. It's the stature of this dude, right? Like, Coulthart was practically drooling over his credibility. Coulthart later on, talking to Elizabeth Vargas, the anchor, said, I think the intransigence by the House Republicans to stopping the UAP disclosure legislation is just going to force greater public disclosure because there is impatience at the highest levels of the military that this is a safety and national security issue that needs to be urgently addressed. When you see a rear admiral retired at the caliber of Tim Gallaudet making those statements, I find it quite sobering.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Tim goes on to repeat a story that we have actually talked about before on this show, where he mentions receiving a secure email from his boss that contained the Go Fast video. This was the video that Ryan Graves shot during the Roosevelt encounter in 2004. And the email was basically like, yo, this is a flight safety risk. We've got these things happening in training areas, and we need to let our pilots know. And later, that email was removed from his system, which has been reported as unusual. I don't know enough about like fancy Navy secret security emails, but they certainly reported it as unusual that the email was pulled back, and they kind of brought it up as evidence of a cover-up.
Yeah. Okay. But like, cover up or just a shitty email server that loses things,
Right. Welcome back to our favorite game show. Is it a cover-up or Microsoft Outlook?
Exactly. This is why I don't use email,
Yeah, I know. I have to send all of our show notes to an unlisted SFTP server using IPv6.
Yeah, I record the show from an undisclosed location on a burner phone,
That explains a lot.
Does it?
When asked about why he believes there's a cover-up, Admiral Tim says, "This is technology that we're still trying to learn about, and it could give us an advantage in any military conflict. So that's a good reason to not disclose the nature of the technology. We don't want to release and disclose all the technology we've recovered. However, I think it is about time that we do disclose that we are in contact with non-human intelligence. That is what needs to be put out there in the public."
Yeah. I mean, yeah, but also, can we have some of the tech too?
Right? Like, yeah. I get it, Tim, but come on.
Admiral
Give
Tim.
me some fusion. Give me some anti-grav.
Seriously.
But yeah, I totally agree that like getting confirmation of NHI contact would be a really good first step, because right now what we're dealing with is all the stigma attached to this topic, right? We've got people like Neil deGrasse Tyson just dripping condescension every time he appears in public talking about it. Bill Nye, the science guy, similarly, like, you believe in aliens. And like,
we'll get him.
Yeah. So if we can get past that first step, I think we can start having some intelligent conversations about what does this mean? And, what is the technology? And right now, like, we're still so hung up on that first step of like, the government has admitted UFOs are real, but they kind of haven't, but they kind of have, but also maybe they're not. Like, oh my God. So yeah, getting confirmation in public would be great. When asked why people in the government say that there is no credible evidence of UFOs, of alien contact, Gallaudet says, "What you have going on right now are, again, legacy classified programs, special access programs, and without congressional direction and White House policy, that's not going to change."
Yeah, I mean, like, Congress expecting some change. It's like they keep asking the official department of keeping secrets from Congress, and they keep being surprised that that official department is keeping secrets from them. I don't know.
I got really fed up with talking about Kirkpatrick once we found out he was retiring, but he actually gave an interview kind of in that last week when it was announced he was retiring, and there was so much other stuff going on. I cut it from the show, but literally one of the things he talked about is his process is he would find out a keyword for a program or something, and he would go to the agency where that program is supposed to exist, and he would ask them, "Do you have a program like this?" Because on paper, he has the right to have access to it. And they would tell him, "No such program exists." And he would go away and go, "Sounds good enough."
Well,
like,
yeah.
Oh my God. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. It's so wild to see people like Kirkpatrick just like take their word for it and then try to shit on Grusch when Grusch's whole point is I found out through multiple independent sources, confirmed this program exists and was illegally denied access to it. And that's as someone who had a need to know, who had all the clearances. And one of the things I found out is Congress also wasn't being informed. So the issue is not, is the program there? The issue is it being improperly kept secret? So when you've got someone like Kirkpatrick who's still operating up the level, like, well, I don't know, I asked them, they said there wasn't a program. Like,
right.
Okay, man, get out of the way and let someone else do the meta job.
Here. Yeah, right.
Oh, man. So anyway, great interview with Admiral Gallaudet that was on News Nation with Ross Coulthart.
Nice.
Speaking of David Grusch, Grusch has been getting interviewed all over the place. Our boy has been getting some media coverage.
Nice.
Most notably, he has had a couple interviews on News Nation. He was on Tucker Carlson, and he was on Joe Rogan.
Okay. I mean, Tucker and Rogan, why? But okay. I mean, they're popular, I guess.
I think that's the only thing you can say in favor of it, right? Is Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson have an incredible reach. And if your goal is to get your message in front of people, it's hard to deny that you're going to reach a lot of people there. But yeah, if I can level with you, although I loves me the David Grusch interview, there is no way I was going to subject myself to an hour of Tucker Carlson and Joe Rogan. So I linked those episodes in the show notes. If you are a person who doesn't mind Joe Rogan or Tucker Carlson, no beef. I ain't mad at you. Feel free to go watch them. I'm sure you'll enjoy them. But I wasn't going to do it. I read the recaps on Twitter and Reddit. As far as I can tell, he did not drop any huge new revelations in either of those two appearances. There were a couple of things that I thought were interesting, though both of them were kind of reiterating things we have heard before. So he repeated the bit that we heard in the Jesse Michaels interview about knowing people who were read into the program and were then upset to find out how it was being run illegally, but that there are severe consequences for speaking out. On Tucker Carlson, he actually, Tucker was like, what? So like they're going to be sent to Leavenworth, and Grusch kind of danced right up to the point of saying that they would just shoot you and leave you in the desert. He's like, there's an extrajudicial process for people who violate the, So, but again, that's not new. He has danced around this point before, this idea that it is dangerous to be in the program and become disillusioned with it, but you can't find out about the program without getting read into it, at which point you are now under all the consequences. He also reiterated the claim that he and his wife has been threatened. Again, this is not new. We have heard this, but the quote that is going around is, "They showed my wife and I that they can touch me at any time." 2 times. Now read into that what you will, but my impression of David Grusch is he's not a guy that's easily intimidated.
No.
And if he's making the point that like, hey, this was inappropriate and this is what triggers his whistleblower complaints is, I am being inappropriately threatened by these agencies. I do think that kind of speaks volumes, more so than vague threats, but the idea that he felt threatened enough to follow the actual chain of steps that he's supposed to do.
Yeah, that makes sense.
In the News Nation interview, there were a couple of really interesting bits that I liked a lot. First of all, Avi Loeb recently was talking about wanting to see more evidence. And then last week, Neil deGrasse Tyson was interviewed on News Nation. And both of them have kind of expressed this idea like, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Like, we need more. Show us some proof. Like, you can't just say these things. That's not science. And they played a clip from David Grusch, which I loved. He said, "I understand they want to see proof. Unfortunately, I can't do that because I need to abide by the law. I'm not here to go to jail. So we have a true transparency issue. And I think they need to lobby the US government for transparency because the astronomy and astrophysics community is being, unfortunately, degraded and destroyed by not providing this information broadly to be studied by high qualified experts like him and other physicists of high repute.
Yeah, seriously. Like, I love the term, I'm not here to go to jail, but
right?
Yeah, but like I think that's really smart to appeal to them and say like, look, you're not getting all that data you've been asking for. Like they have it and you're the one suffering for it. So
yeah.
You know what
and
to
this
do.
is a thing we've been talking about David Grusch from day one, right? Is this idea of like, why didn't he share the evidence? Like, because he legally can't.
Yeah, right?
That is treason.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. But here's the juicy bit, and I apologize for our audience because I already know what the show title is going to be, and it's teasing this bit, which means I'm doing the thing where the title of the video is the last thing we talk about in the episode. So here we are, 45 minutes in. I'm finally getting to the bit you probably clicked on this video for. But I promise you it's worth it. It's a juicy bit. On News Nation, responding to the fairly common criticism that David Grusch has no firsthand knowledge. He's just repeating stories he heard from other people, which, first of all, even if that was true, we've talked about that before.
Still, yeah.
David Grusch is not some rando guy in a bar telling you a story his janitor friend heard. David Grusch was an investigator whose literal job was to go track down information, and he didn't hear it from one or two people. He heard it from 40 different sources across the spectrum of the government and the intelligence community. So, but even if that were true, that is a common complaint lodged against him. So they asked him about it. Hey, how do you address people who say you have no firsthand knowledge? And David Grusch says, I couldn't be very upfront about my firsthand knowledge until recently. I got some other security approvals through the pre-publication security review process. I did have some firsthand knowledge of some specific parts of the program. I am currently drafting an op-ed that I'm going to release in a few weeks, and I will be discussing what I actually do know firsthand. I just couldn't discuss that overtly at the time, including at the hearing, because the Pentagon and the IC were sitting on some of my pre-publication review paperwork at the time, so I could not acknowledge that. The deeper description of what I know has been redacted. They proposed a redaction in a pre-publication security review response a few days ago, and they're telling me to withhold legally some of the firsthand knowledge that I have, but I am allowed to generally discuss that I was read into a UAP-related program directly by the U.S. government.
Oh, cool. So,
right?
Yeah, so Christmas presents. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm trying very hard not to get overhyped because who knows? Ross Coulthart on Twitter responding to this said he doesn't know what will be in the op-ed. He speculated it could be some photos or videos that Grusch saw. So it's probably worth tamping our expectations down.
Sure.
The outcome of this is probably not going to be David Grusch saying, I went into a bunker and saw 12 flying saucers and the body of a gray, and I shook hands with a gray, and then I went to space. Like, we should recalibrate now. But this really does take us from David Grusch only knows what other people have told him to David Grusch was read into a program. That's a big change to what we've heard about David Grusch.
And being allowed to talk about the program is uncommon.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there are a couple of things that I think are really interesting here. So first of all, I normally, when you've got a witness with a big, exciting, dramatic story and their story changes a few months later, that's a red flag. In this case, Grusch has a very plausible reason for why he's changing what he said. He legally was not allowed to say anything before. He has been following the rules because he is our good boy. And now he has got permission to talk about it. But I also like one of the things Grusch has talked about before is him taking his story to the DOPSR, to the pre-publication review people,
Mhm.
was basically calling the government's bluff. Like, look, you have two choices here. You can either let me talk about this stuff, or you can say, no, you can't talk about this stuff. But in order to do that, you have to say the CIA objects to paragraph 3. And now I can go out and say the CIA won't let me talk about something, I won't be able to say what it was, but I can talk about the fact that I've been muzzled. So here he is doing the same thing. They let him talk the first time, and I think they regret it. And now they're trying to go the other way and go, oh, you can't talk about your firsthand knowledge. And now here he is coming out and going, hey, they won't let me talk about my firsthand knowledge.
Yeah. And he's got specific groups that he's going to call out for it. This is very exciting. I mean,
so
awesome.
It could be really good. I'm trying to tamp down my expectations, but fingers crossed. New Year's surprise. That would be great.
Would you classify this as a very exciting time?
Hey, I would. It's a very exciting time. God damn it.
Very exciting time.
Very exciting time. Oh my God. All right. Chuck, I thank you for recording with me. To the audience, thank you all for sitting with us. This is a little bit of a shorter episode. To tip my hands, it's not that, we didn't cover stuff. We covered all the important stuff, but also I'm about to go on vacation for a couple of weeks. So this is our last episode of the year. You will see us back in the new year. I think our next recording date is January 7th.
Something like that.
I've got off Christmas week and New Year's week, and then we'll be coming back to record again. So fingers crossed, we'll be coming back to talk about the big article that David Grusch wrote and all the feedback and follow up from that.
Yeah. Obviously, depending on how exciting it is. If it's
if there's truly jaw-dropping stuff, we will record an emergency pod, as my coworker likes to call it.
Emergency pod.
All right. Thank you all for joining us on It's a Very Exciting Time. You can find show notes and more on our website, veryexcitingtime.com, as well as links to our social media accounts.
And you can email us at Scott or Chuck at veryexcitingtime.com. And if you'd like to support the show, please check out our Patreon at patreon.com/veryexcitingtime.
And Chuck, as always, my wife thanks you for listening to me talk about UFOs so she doesn't have to.